shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling great.
So welcome everyone to this week's edition of Beyond Your Wildest Genes podcast. It is Dr. Wanda Lee McPhee, your co-host for today, and joining me is Dr. Nima Rahmany, the stress doctor. Dr.
Hello.
Nima, hello.
Hey, what's up? How are things over there in beautiful Nova Scotia?
They are wonderful today. It is a beautiful day here in Nova Scotia, and it is often a beautiful day, of course, here in lovely Nova Scotia.
Cool.
And we will have people listening to us today from all around the globe. Our subscribers are international and multinational, and we are thrilled to introduce you and your work to them. For those who aren't familiar with Dr. Nima, he is a chiropractor turned edutainer on a mission to teach individuals how to dissolve the root cause of stress. He has created a breakthrough new tool called the Overview Method, where participants are taken through an exercise to clear out emotional baggage and resentments that are holding them back from moving in new ways in health, in business, in personal relationships, in life in general. So currently teaching and lecturing on the Overview Method around the world, as well as at home in Vancouver, Canada, he has helped so many people with managing stress, with dealing with the emotional trauma that they've gone through in their life, and really understanding healing beyond what your website calls meditation, medication, and affirmations, which is fascinating.
Yes, which are all tools that have been used to heal from stressful situations, but I've discovered that there's a deeper way of healing, and I just love teaching about it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this. Stress you're the stress doctor. So
yes.
How do people know that stress has become a problem for them? I mean, we all have stress, right?
We all have stress. Stress is basically a perception of threat, really, in our environment. It's that it's a perception that we're in danger. And, we have the obvious feelings, like the pressure on our chest, the anxiety, and that feeling of like being in a corner, feeling like you want to be somewhere other than where you are at this time. But what happens is if you don't learn how to process stress, how to handle it, and how to turn it around, eventually your body goes through kind of an adaptive phase, which then leads to exhaustion. And then it starts giving you some signs and symptoms. And so what I do is I usually, seeing patients for the past 15 years with primarily stress-related disorders, I saw very common things that your body lets you know that you suck at dealing with your stress. And the first and foremost one would probably be, a lack of sleep. So insomnia, you start to feel anxious, you start to feel depressed eventually. So depression, anxiety, insomnia. Right away, your digestive symptoms will start to get out of whack, whether you're not pooping properly, you have issues with your number 2, you're going too much, not enough. The digestive symptoms start to show. You also will have hormonal imbalances. You might have some infertility, you might low sex drive, lack of drive, lack of motivation. You start to develop headaches, migraines, back pain, some jaw clenching that starts to happen consistently. These are some of the early warning signs that you're just not really doing well with stress. Compounded over time, you start to feel a lack of drive and motivation. You start to feel like life doesn't really have a purpose. And then eventually you start developing illnesses. If you've only had it for a little bit, your body is magnificently designed to cope with short-term stresses. The fight or flight, the tiger's chasing after you. When the tiger stops chasing after you, you return back to grazing or back to your normal rest and digest. If you've been under chronic tiger attack mode for 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, then you're supposed to feel crappy. Immune system is another one, getting frequent colds and infections. And if you don't pay attention, eventually it leads to chronic illness, because most chronic illnesses are due to the fact that you have high cortisol and adrenaline and cortisol levels in your bloodstream, and lo and behold, that's what stress hormones are. And compounded for a decade, then it's normal that you should have diabetes, heart disease, cancer, chronic infections, infertility, all of the thyroid issues. Any one of these health concerns, chronic illness health concerns that you're going, anxiety, depression, even advanced mental illness, obsessive compulsive, bipolar, those types of things are all stressful events you haven't learned to process. And when we blame our genes for it, then we basically remove all accountability and responsibility for changing our story. And I just became very intrigued with educating people that your body is not forsaking you. It's not working against you. It's actually working for you to get you back to the proper lifestyle first, and to get you back to those stories of victimhood and suffering and trauma, and try to get you to return to love and gratitude. And that's kind of embarrassing for me to say as a practitioner of 15 years and wanting to be objective and all that stuff, but no healing power is more powerful than opening your heart to being loving and grateful to your journey, to the things that you thought were horrible, to turn it around and make your mess your message.
Absolutely. And, I can think of nothing more exhausting when you put it in those terms than being chased by a tiger every day, all the time. There's not one of us that wouldn't eventually give out from just pure physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion at that point.
And you can and the funny thing is that tiger, you kind of delve into the person's life, that tiger takes on many forms. That tiger takes on the form of a relationship issue. That tiger takes on the form of a problem with your child, raising your kid, and if they're having issues, and all of a sudden you're interpreting it as a tiger attack, or financial woes, or an unmet expectation with your life. And so these things become tiger attacks. And the funny thing is that if you trace that back further, it comes back to beliefs that I'm not good enough, I'm inadequate, and I'm unworthy of love. So when I made this discovery that health problems are due to stress, and stress is due to interpretation of events, and those interpretations that disempower us and make us feel not good enough, unworthy of love, bad person, all of that stuff, it's like, wow, we really need to pay attention to our stories and our interpretations of events. So that's why I developed a tool that goes after the root cause of your stress.
And that's one of the pieces on your website, theoverviewexperience.com, that you talk about the delusions that are causing you stress. And, delusions is an interesting word.
Correct.
Where do you need to go with that?
Well, I discovered that stress is not caused by what's happening to us, but our thoughts about what's happening to us. So, case in point, I'll use very simple analogy, Wanda. Let's say you're in traffic. You have two people that are stuck in traffic. Person number one is white-knuckling it, pissed off, honking, slamming their hand on the steering wheel. The person in the exact same traffic jam in the next car has their music turned on and they're dancing. So the question is, if I ask both of those people, what's stressing you out? That person, the first person would say, this traffic. And just by virtue of the example of the other person next to them, I can easily tell them that no, the traffic isn't stressing you out. It's your belief about the traffic, and the belief is a delusion. It's not it's a counterfactual belief. It's a belief that's not grounded in reality, and the belief associated with stress during a traffic jam is a delusion. It's the delusion that there shouldn't be traffic at this time. So the truth is, there's traffic. The delusion, the unconscious delusion that I have against this traffic is that at this time there shouldn't be any traffic. The person in car number one has that delusion. The person in car number two is in the same traffic, but they don't live with that delusion. And so because they don't live with that delusion, their cortisol levels are different. They're dancing. They are going with the flow of life. And they're not resistant. And that resistance in number one creates higher blood pressure, creates a change in their blood sugar, creates a depletion of serotonin, creates an increase of blood sugar because the insulin receptors are all shut down. So all of these cascade of events in person number one that's driving their health towards a sickness state is based on a delusion. And so when I discovered that, it was one of those come to Jesus moments where I couldn't stay in my chiropractic office any longer. I had to go travel the world and teach people how to dissolve and dismantle their delusions at the root cause of their traumas and their stresses and dramas. Because most of the time, you'll hold on to a delusion and you'll say, I feel stress, and then they say, okay, here, take a medication for it. Or you say, I feel stress, and you say, here, let's do some ohms and some meditation. You say, I feel stress, and okay, let's say some affirmations. But as long as you're doing those things and you're holding on to the delusion that there shouldn't be traffic at this time, you're wasting your friggin' time. I'd rather you meditate for the sake of co-creation of what you would love to have and affirm in your life, rather than to run away from a tiger that's caused and created by a freaking delusion. So I love teaching about it.
Absolutely. And that is obviously something that so many of us can relate to in so many different parts of life, not just traffic, relationships.
Yeah. Relationship, the greatest delusion in relationship problems. So you want to talk about delusion. Wanda, if somebody here is listening and they're having a challenge in their relationship, they're going through a divorce, or a teenager is frustrating them, just realize it's not what's happening that's frustrating you. It's your delusion that they should see and do things my way. They should prioritize my needs. They should see it my way as the greatest relationship delusion that creates disharmony in relationships. When you remove the delusion that they should see it my way, you become creative in communication and honor the fact that everyone sees things the way they see it. And if I want Wanda to see things my way, I got to sell that concept to her in a way she gets and understands. Otherwise, she should see it her own way.
Well, and that brings the responsibility back to you,
100%,
as the communicator.
This is the key to this method. This what I'm teaching is that everybody wants to play victim. Everybody right now, if you're thinking about what's going wrong in your life, chances are you're running a story of victimhood. They should see it my way. They should have treated me differently. I have an opportunity to do that. I was quote unquote screwed over this year by my business associates who should have bought the practice off of me, who shouldn't have gone 3 kilometers down the road and opened up their own clinic, who should have been so kind enough to offer me, a fair compensation for the patient files that I transferred over. They should have. And as long as I was holding on to those delusions about them, my resentment would be just building and building, and that blocks my creativity from moving forward and actually coming up with a solution and a strategy to empower all areas of my life. I could have stayed stuck in victimhood, which I did for a couple weeks. I was a victim. But how often are we in victimhood for months, years, to things that have happened in our past that we think that shouldn't have happened? And as long as we stay stuck in that victimhood, we kind of, it paralyzes our growth. And I'm all about empowering people rather than getting them stuck in victimhood. Empowering you to change your beliefs so that you can get creative and move forward and dance and adapt and become resilient to the moment rather than a victim to it.
Well, they say that resentments are like drinking your own poison, because the other person is not really affected by you resenting them. You are really just poisoning yourself.
I always say resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I'm not sure, that's a quote somewhere, but that's 100% true. The resentment that you're holding on to is what's really creating an issue.
And that's where this illness and trauma sort of stems from in so many cases.
100%. Trauma, basically, you take 2 people in a war, and I've met 2 people who are in the same battle in a war. One of them becomes an addict and creates a downward spiral in their life. The other one takes that as lessons and moves forward and becomes an entrepreneur and becomes extremely successful. You ask them, what do you owe, what is it that you owe your success, or what is it that you owe where you're at in your life? And both of them would say it was that event. And so what that means is our interpretation of those. It's not the traumatic event. Traumatic events suck. I've been through them. I work with firefighters, police, ambulance, prison guards, and in my chiropractic practice all the time. And I ask them questions all the time. It's not what you see and what's happening to you. It's not the trauma that you experience. It's your interpretation of the trauma that will dictate your trajectory in the future and your health. And most people with post-traumatic is what I discovered. You can actually see the video on my page, theoverviewexperience.com/trauma. That little you see in the overview experience, the little link at the top that says PTSD trauma. If you click on it and open it up, you're going to notice something. I did a little 20-minute documentary on post-traumatic stress disorder, and I discovered that there's post-traumatic stress, and then there's post-traumatic stress disorder. And the disorder happens not because of the issue or the injury. It happens because of the belief that it shouldn't have happened. So what I do with the overview method is I instead of doing yoga, meditation, affirmations, medications, which everybody's tried, I go back to those events and we show them why exactly it should have happened at the time, the way that it did, all the gifts that came from it, and how their lives would be meaningless, and all the greatest things that they have in their lives wouldn't exist had it not been for that trauma. When you remove the belief it shouldn't have happened, immediately the disorder is gone. And we've seen people in 20 years of post-traumatic stress disorder, in 20 to 30 minutes, you can actually watch it on that video, dissolve and dismantle their delusion about it, and the illness is completely transformed by not having to even treat it. It's kind of weird. Nobody believes me because I'm a chiropractor, but I've hacked PTSD.
Well, and I've seen the video. It is truly amazing. We have shared some of the same mentors over the years, and so I understand the science behind what you're doing, which of course the results speak for themselves, but this is not theoretical. This is real.
Yeah.
And to be able to bring people that peace is just amazing.
Yeah, it was just an amazing discovery I made this year, going back into practice and hiring my media guy to kind of follow me around with these transformations that I've been able to see. And we just discovered, I was like, holy shit, post-traumatic stress disorder is based on a belief. It's based on an event. It's based on a belief and interpretation about an event that when you change the interpretation, the event you turn to a gratitude state for it, you no longer have the disorder. And the biggest challenge then becomes not healing from it, but to actually find people with that disorder who are tired of the label and want to overcome it. Because most people actually want to stay stuck on that label.
And that is an interesting sort of dichotomy, I guess, in healthcare in general. Both as a chiropractor, we see people who come to us with physical pain who really sometimes actually don't want to be well, which is always shocking to people who aren't clinical. And the same thing with some of these emotionally based disorders is there are values in being sick, sadly.
This was the biggest shocker that I had made in my chiropractic practice, and I'm sure, Wanda, you can relate, was that not everyone truly wants to be well. And we all say, but how can they not? Our health is our number one priority. Our health should be No, actually. There are stories, there are people who sometimes, for example, I was in Rome this past week, and I did a session on a chiropractor who developed grand mal seizures, who has epilepsy, and she noticed that when she's not feeling loved and appreciated, the epilepsy is a strategy that she uses unconsciously. Not that she's a bad person. It hit her hard because we did the session, and she goes, holy shit, I just realized that these seizures are a strategy for me to get love. And she's like, oh my God. She was just tears, and she realized that tears of gratitude, that there's an underlying motive behind illness, and so this forced her to get more real. And so she's now, the strategy moving forward was for her to find other strategies of finding love rather than waiting for the body to break down, overloading herself, not doing self-care, literally falling to the ground so that others could lift her up and say, I love you, and all of that stuff. We have an unconscious motive to stay sick. And it's sad to even think about, and it's very controversial to even say, because people really get, they're they really get up in arms when you suggest that, it's your responsibility for healing, that there's things that you can do. And in order to heal, first we have to see what benefits, why we should have gotten ourselves in our situation. The greatest thing you can do if you have a chronic illness is to see what the benefits are of that illness at this time, how this was a strategy. If you start looking at illness and things in life in general as a strategy, then you'll start to realize, if I want to heal from this, it's wise for me to get creative, to find other strategies to find love and appreciation. I know my ex-wife, her father had 6 heart attacks, and I could totally see he's a lonely guy, and he was using, not consciously, but as soon as he'd have the heart attack, people would come to the hospital and visit. He would say, "Oh, this is what's happening. Can you go and fill my bank account up?" And these things were a strategy to get love, and this is a an unconscious thing. So.
And when we say that, it is unconscious. It's not a malicious strategy in most cases, and that's people really taking that time for the introspection and coming to the conscious awareness that this is there,
right,
is the first big step, because we're not.
All I'm saying is, first find what the hidden gems are of it, and the first inclination is to say, no, there are no benefits of this illness, but look carefully. If you look carefully, not only will you have in illness, are there benefits like I've seen people get sick to bring families together. I've seen people resist healing and treatment because their disability check would be gone, and they'd have to force them to go out and follow their dreams. The problem happens when they use people. If you find yourself using your diagnosis consistently, oh, I can't because of the fibromyalgia, I can't because of the so-and-so. Oftentimes what's been frustrating me is seeing that the diagnosis becomes an excuse not to go and live your dream, because it's too damn scary to go out and live what you're here to do. It's easier to be in a safe place, being taken care of, and being disempowered. And so I'm all about working with people who are ready to move on past their label.
Well, and that's one of the missions, obviously, of our Beyond Your Wildest Dreams podcast, is to get information like this in the hands of people who can use information, strategies, tools, people, resources to help themselves. Healthcare is a personal choice. It's a personal responsibility, both internally and as a society. And I know you share some of those views on changing the healthcare system globally.
Yeah. The greatest gift that you can give, if you want to give people tools, Wanda, the greatest gift that a person who's not healthy can give themselves is to study what happens to the body under stress. When you study what happens to the body under stress, you're humbled by the awareness and realization that, holy crap, my body isn't dysfunctional. It's actually working exactly as it should. Then you start asking, what environment am I placing my body into? What am I feeding my cells? How is my spine moving? What about my soul? Am I complete with my past, and do I have a definitive strategy of living my purpose and finding who I am and contributing, making a contribution to humanity moving forward in the future? No, if I'm not putting proper foods into my body, if I'm not making sure that I have the requirements in my body, my spine does not move properly, if I do not have a completeness with my past journey and a direct movement forward with a clear strategy of creating the highest, most self-actualized version of myself, contributing to the planet in some small way, in some small corner, that I feel that my life has had some meaning, well then chances are your body's going to fall apart. And you can take all the pills, you can do all the meditations, and you do all the happy affirmations you want. You're barking up the wrong tree. And so that's what I'm here to do. I'm calling for a healthcare revolution. I'm calling for a conscious awakening that health is something that we work towards. Health is the byproduct of a life well lived. Health is the byproduct of completing our stories, of being grateful and moving our lives in the direction of something meaningful. And a lack of health is simply a swift kick in the butt to try to move us in that direction. And it's not available at your doctor's office. It's available by going to a doctor who's a teacher. Doctor means teacher. It's about finding the teachers and mentors to help you become self-actualized.
Well, I think that is a perfect summary of everything we've talked about so far today. So I would really like to thank you for joining us on our podcast today. It's been Dr. Nima Rahmany on Beyond Your Wildest Genes. And for more information, go to Dr. Nima's website, theoverviewexperience.com. He is based in Vancouver, Canada, but as you've heard, he is a global traveler, and certainly in the internet world, no one is far away anymore. So if there's more information that he can help you with, by all means, find him on the internet. Thank you, Dr. Nima.
Thank you for including me in your beautiful podcast, and I love the work that you're doing, and I look forward to sharing the stage with you one day.
Absolutely.
I'm sure we're going to be working together more and more. I love what you're all about.
Thank you.
Thank you.